Welcome back, viewers, to Point of View. Today with me in studio, Mr. Edigah Kavulavu. Now, Mr. Kavulavu, let's talk about the African Court of Justice and Human Rights. Maybe for our viewers, we can give them a context. Where did it emanate from?
Well, I think in order to give it a better context, we're talking about justice and human rights.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned earlier on, justice for citizens lies in it is the role of the government to ensure that justice is upheld.
Indeed.
And the government has to put in place mechanisms to ensure that whenever atrocities are committed in a country, the perpetrators, the crimes are investigated and prosecuted. In the event that a country is unable to do so, we look at regional mechanisms. If regional mechanisms fail, then we look at international mechanisms. For example, we have the International Criminal Court, which spells out in clear terms the international crimes. But again, you find that these regional mechanisms act as they are complementary to domestic mechanisms, meaning that these crimes that are being committed at the international level also need to be committed at the local level.
Okay.
At the African setup, we find that we have the African Union, which comprises of quite a number of African countries. And of course, there has to be mechanisms which put in place to ensure that the rights of the African people are promoted and protected. And thus we have the African Court of Justice, which was created by a protocol. And very recently in Malabo last year in 2014, we had a protocol was passed that gave the African Court of Justice and Human Rights the mandate to try international crimes as well as transnational crimes. This came out of the realization that in Africa, grave crimes are being committed.
Indeed.
Because when you look at international crimes, for example, the crime of genocide, you find that these crimes are very grave. And it's not only the government that can handle these type of cases, but it also requires the intervention of regional bodies. Let's, for example, take the situation in Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda. African countries and the world were mum on this, and that is why these atrocities scaled to that level. Therefore, the African Court of Justice has a human rights division as well as a criminal division. This means that whenever these crimes are committed, they can be referred to this particular body.
All right. Now, maybe giving a little bit of context to that, you've talked about justice and human rights and the Rwandan situation where we didn't have people talking, and by people I mean the African states. We have Burundi at the moment heading towards a state of civil war again, and we're not having a deep and sort of concerned outcry from African states. Why is this so, and maybe what are the implications of this silence?
Well, I think as Africans we need to believe in our institutions, but again you find that most African leaders play a critical role in the regional bodies. Looking at the AU, for example, when African leaders say that they want to withdraw from the Rome Statute, the question I would ask myself is this for the best interest of the victims, or is it just for them to galvanize themselves? That having been said, it's very important that African states and African regional institutions speak up against certain atrocities, for example, what is happening in Burundi. And whenever we don't have institutions that work, whenever we have individuals who do not respect the rule of law, it is the citizens who get injured at the end of the day. Because if you look at the case of Burundi, there was a peace agreement that was signed in Arusha, in Tanzania. And right now, the persons who are in power, the president, they don't want to adhere to those legal documents that we ourselves have created as Africans. Therefore, at the end of the day, you find that when our leaders do not follow the rule of law, it is the citizen who suffers.
Indeed. I mean, thus far, they're the ones taking up arms and protesting on the streets. And maybe I'll ask you a very general question. Do you think what President Nkurunziza is doing is legally correct or politically correct?
Well, it is not legally correct because the term of the presidential term has been clearly spelled out in the Burundian constitution. Therefore, going against it will be unconstitutional. And in Africa, most African leaders have a history of wanting to stick in power.
Oh, yeah.
Therefore, this is something that is not new. And whenever we have leaders wanting to stick in power, whenever we have a political leadership a selfish political leadership, you find that at the end of the day, we are going to have civil unrest. In 2007 and 2008, those are some of the things that led to civil unrest in Kenya.
Yeah.
Therefore, I would say, in as much as it is a political move by the president, it is not good for the country. It is not good for the gains that we've made as Africans. It is not good for the gains that Burundi had made, because they had put in place a new constitution. They had signed a peace agreement just to ensure that the transitional process in Burundi is smooth. Therefore, wanting to stick in power unconstitutionally, it really closed back on the gains that Burundi had made.
That's very true. Now, the African Court of Justice and Human Rights, given contextually in the Burundian situation, what should we expect, or what are they supposed to be doing right now at the moment? We haven't had any talk from them or any sort of initiative being taken from them.
Well, we cannot expect much from the African Court of Justice and Human Rights, because at the moment it has not been operationalized. It requires 15 ratifications. So far we have around 4 signatures, Kenya leading the pack.
Okay.
And one of the contentious issues around the African Court Protocol, or the African Court of Justice, is the immunity for sitting heads of states.
Okay.
So what we might be expecting at the moment is for the ICC to monitor the situation, because it is highly likely that international crimes are going to be committed in that country. Therefore, the other thing we can expect from the African region, for example, the East African Community, is just to speak against such vices being committed in Burundi.
And maybe why haven't we had the EAC speaking out in one voice against maybe a member reprimanding the Burundi nation, or maybe even guiding it thus far?
Well, in Africa, we've had a situation whereby African leaders galvanize each other. Let's look at the Bashir situation, whereby Bashir has been indicted by the ICC. When the president of Kenya was at the ICC, the African Union was very vocal in saying that the cases should be deferred, or the cases should be transferred from the ICC. Therefore, when you have one of them going through such a situation as that in Burundi, you'll find it very difficult for the presidents to speak out against such occurrences.
And what has been the position of the civil society in Burundi over the situation in the country and the reaction from the region itself?
Well, it has been very difficult for the civil society as well as the media, because you can't speak out openly against the government as currently it is in Burundi, because the government forces have been stifling the members of the civil society, and quite a number of them right now are hiding in neighboring countries, neighboring countries.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to the African Court of Justice and Human Rights in comparison to the ICC. Now, a lot of African states really spoke out against the Kenyan cases in the ICC, and this led to the formation of this court. Is it a pro for us as a continent, or is it really against our best interests for us to completely leave the ICC?
I think it is a political move. And I say this because there are quite a lot that will be required to go into this court. Let's look at it in terms of funding, witness protection, among other things, even just the ratifications. How sure are we that we will get all the ratifications required to operationalize the African Court of Justice and Human Rights? the charter as it is right now, it doesn't have ratifications from all the African countries.
Exactly.
The Rome Statute has the highest number of ratifications and signatures from the African states. Therefore, I think it's very important for us to build up on the gains made by the ICC. Article 27 is very good for Africa because it talks about no immunity for sitting heads of states as well as senior government officials, because atrocity crimes are committed by persons in power. And for the longest time, it has been very hard, very difficult to put these persons to book, therefore perpetrating impunity. Therefore, in order to bridge the impunity gap, it's important that you have institutions that can prosecute, that can investigate the perpetrators of these crimes.
That's very true. Now, we're taking a short break, ladies and gentlemen. My guest, Mr. Edigah Kavulavu. Do keep it Point of View on TVC.